the ground a little bit less bouncy and a little more friction. So if we look here, if we turn up that friction, it'll make the radius a little bit smaller, because no friction, they're going to slide all over. But if we turn it up a little tighter, the particles won't go too crazy. So let's go ahead and save. And this is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and look at an animation. Let's go and set up the render settings. So this is the fun part. We're going to go in here. We're actually going to be using V-Ray and just set that up in the renderer. It is a third-party renderer, but it's really powerful. They've been using it on a lot of movies lately, and it works with Cinema 4D and Maya and a bunch of other ones. So hopefully the settings will be pretty similar. So first of all, let's set this to HD output. Maybe for now we'll do half HD, 960 by 540. And I'm going to come over here into the settings, and we want to go into the environment, and we want to set up the reflection map. So in order to do this, we need to set up a environment material. So if we hit M, it's going to bring up our material editor, and we'll click on one of the slots. We'll add a material, and we're going to come down here to V-Ray HDRI. And then we're going to click in the bitmap here. We're going to browse. And I have this warehouse HDR. Now, it's not an exact match to the room, but it's just going to add some nice reflections. And we'll hit OK. And we're going to set this to spherical. And we'll turn up the gamma a little bit. So you can kind of see what that is. Kind of a cool looking room. So we'll close that, close this. And we're going to take this and drop it into the reflection channel. So we'll hit OK. Then we can close that. Now we want to create a glass material. So we'll click on another slot, and we'll click standard, and we'll change this to V-Ray material. And we'll hit OK. So the V-Ray material is going to have slightly different settings than the standard materials, but pretty similar types of things. So we'll call this glass. And to set up a glass, I'll show the background here. We're just going to turn up the reflectivity a little bit. And we might actually even add a fall off. So we'll hit OK. And you can kind of see what that does. We just add a little bit of, Fresnel kind of fall off. So that's good. We'll go up. And we're also going to turn on the refraction. So if we crank this up, you can get a much more glass looking material. So now let's go ahead and apply this to our object. So we'll select all of the stuff here, drop our glass piece, assign to selection, and there we go. Now I also want to set up my background. So if we come over here to my original project file, I have a ground image, so we can see where the ball is going to hit the ground and shatter. So we'll take this and we can just drag it right into the environment, and we can set it as a background and an environment map. So in this case, we'll just hit OK, and now we can really start seeing what the shot's going to look like. Now I can also click in here, let's see, show safe frame. And that will basically give us the guides to keep us within that HD. So it's kind of helpful. Now, one thing I want to do is set up a material that allows shadows to be cast on the ground. So usually we call it a matte shadow material. In Cinema 4D, it's called like a shadow catching material. So to do that, we're going to create a special material. So click on here, and we're going to change it to a special material called V-Ray Material Wrapper, and we'll hit OK, and we'll keep the old material as a submap. And we just have to do a couple of things. We want to matte the surface, so we want to create a matte from the actual surface, and we want the alpha contribution to be -1, and we want to collect the shadows and affect the alpha. So we basically just turn on all this stuff, set that to -1. So now if we drop this on our box or our floor layer, what's going to happen is if I do a quick test render, so I'll hit F9, we can see that the glass is rendering, but we no longer see that ground layer. So this is going to be really helpful for later, so we have the alpha channel that we need for compositing. So we'll go ahead and close that. Now I can take this gray layer now and just go right click, let's see, and do object properties, and we can make it maybe see-through, just for the sake of being able to see the rest of the scene. So the pieces are going to fall down. We might move the camera in a little closer and maybe zoom it out a little bit. We just really want to be in the middle of all of this action. So looks pretty good. Alright, so we've got the glass pieces falling. Probably need a little bit of lighting. So let's go click on the lights. We'll go to V-Ray lights and I'll click on this one here. And in the top view, we're just going to add an overhead light. So this is what it looks like, maybe about that size. And then in the top view, we'll just drag it up a little taller. So now we need to go ahead and start playing around with the way that this looks. So we can come in here and see exactly how this is going to look. So we'll hit F9. Let's go ahead and size it down a bit. It seems really big when you're working at such a small resolution, so we'll do 640. All right. F9. Alright, so this is going to give us a few things to think about. First, the color of the glass, the reflectivity, and some of the material settings that we've chosen to start with. So another thing we can do is we can go to the simulation and shut off all of the extra pieces and basically just focus on this main set of particles. And this maybe will help things render a little faster. We can also shut off the cast shadows while we work just to kind of get things going. So first thing, we need to go into the materials, and I might even change the color of the light to match the room a little bit. So I might just click a warm color here, turn it up. But remember, we're going to separate this path, so we can also do color correction and a lot of other things later on that are going to really help, define what this shot looks like. So another thing, I may turn up the gamma for this reflection map. And it may help brighten up the reflection as well. Okay. All right, so that's looking pretty good, for a first little pass. Let's hit 6 and turn on those microparticles again. And let's take a look as it first impacts. This is looking good, but remember, we want this shot to be super slow motion. So in order to do that, we need to render out a really high number of frames. So we need to overcrank our render. So in order to do that, we want to come over here to the time controls, and we're going to go to custom, and we're going to type in a crazy amount, like say 480 frames per second, and go higher to make it even slower. And we'll hit OK. So now our active time range is actually going to change to a lot higher of a value. And another thing we want to keep track of is our activating particle system. So if we move in here, we're going to see that our particles are going to be a little bit slower to react, and that may be okay. But if we want to make any changes, we just go into the settings and do that. But let's just take a look and what this is going to look like. So if we go back just a little bit before it breaks, maybe about frame 530, we can go animation, make preview, and we'll set a custom range. So we'll do say 530 by maybe 650. Now we want to go ahead and we'll set that to 100%, but we want to play back at 24 frames per second. So I'll just do uncompressed and create, let's see, all right, so this is the basic simulation here, and it's kind of giving us an idea of what's going on. We can play around with the different settings, and when you're dealing with a project like this where it's going to take a long time to render, you really want to make sure that you get it right in the viewports and in the animation previews so that you're not spending a lot of time re-rendering stuff and getting things perfectly dialed in. So let's go and set this up to render. Now, we could probably work on it a little bit more, but I think we're pretty close. All right, so let's go and set this up to render. Now, I want to go and render, say, frame 480 all the way till about 720. So we'll come up here, click on the render settings. We'll type 480 to about 720. And we'll come down here, click on File, and let's just save this, Shatter version 1. And we're going to use the OpenEXR format. And if we go up to the setup, we can pretty much leave it as default, but this is going to be a 32-bit per channel format, so that'll be really helpful. And then we want to add a Z pass, so we'll click Add, come down here to Z depth, and OK. So it should be good in the 32-bit channel to give us enough of that information. So this is pretty good. Make sure we set this to full HD. And we'll click render. It may take a little while, so I'll be back in a bit. All right, so the fun continues. We're going to be jumping into After Effects here, and I've imported our render. Now, instead of using the render that we just created, I'm just going to go ahead and use the original render from the shot. And you know what you're going to do is you're going to import the sequence. So just grab one of the images, set it to EXR sequence, and that'll bring it in as a movie file. And what we're going to do is we're going to right click and choose Interpret Footage Main, and we're going to set the color management to Preserve RGB. And this just helps bring the color space into range for a standard sort of After Effects workflow. And we're also going to set it to Straight Unmatted. Now I'm also going to go to the Z pass. So we have our glass footage and our Z pass. We're going to right click on the pass and choose Interpret Footage Main. Also, we'll set it to Preserve RGB. And for this one, we're actually going to set it to ignore the alpha channel. And also, I want to make sure I set the frame rate to 23.976. And likewise for our glass footage. So this is the idea. So we'll take our glass and we'll drop it into a new comp. So make some space here. Now the shot that we just created actually doesn't have the pieces of glass inside of the ball until it actually hits down. So originally I just sort of fixed that by using a second render of the ball and just kind of composited together. So in this case I'll just ignore that, but you know, you shouldn't have that problem if you follow along with the previous step. So, all right, so we have this. We have our ground background layer, so we'll drop that in. So we'll put that below it, and basically we're done. No, we have this Z pass also, so let's drag that out, and that looks pretty good. Now, if it's out of range, so if it doesn't quite look right, go over into 32 bits per channel. So hold down Alt